كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. We praise Allah and we give Him thanks and we give Him glory, for He's the Lord of everything in existence. And we ask Him to bless His Messenger Muhammad, to elevate his mention and rank, and to shower him with protection and grace along with his family and his righteous followers, as He did with Ibrahim, his family and righteous followers in the past. Welcome to another installment of spiritual protection against pandemics. And what I wanted to do is take this opportunity to continue what we started speaking about in the last session. We had spoken about seeking protection and seeking refuge in Allah, at-ta'awudhu min jahdi al-bala'. And I don't think I gave it its due right. You know, a 10-minute episode is not enough to uncover a lot of the profound and the deep meanings of the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, especially in light of the fact that it is supposed to be a means for us in taking preventive measures. So it's really important for us to get to the proper understanding of this particular statement. So it is to seek refuge and to seek protection in Allah from difficulties, trials, tribulations and tests, from turmoil, from severe calamities that are beyond our capacity, And I wanted to stop for a moment with this issue, because a lot of times you hear people telling you something that is not actually correct. They say God will never test you with what you cannot handle. God will not test you, or He won't give you what you can't handle. The reality is there are many things around that we cannot handle. The only way we can handle things that are difficult and beyond our means is by turning to Allah. And this is exactly the point behind this particular duaa that we are taught. So to turn to Allah and to beg Him and to ask Him to protect us, to give us refuge from trials and tribulations, from tests and calamities, from turmoil that we cannot handle, that is overbearing, that is overwhelming. So this is the proper thing to say, instead of us tossing around the statement of God won't give you what you can't handle. That statement, unfortunately, is a mistranslation or a misnomer of لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, which has to do with number one, the rules and regulations within Islam that are all within the ability of the servant. So the very first condition that we have for many of our acts of worship after the person being Muslim, that's a prerequisite, is that they have the physical ability to carry out that duty. So for example, salah, we know we're supposed to do it while we're standing up, but if someone does not have the physical ability to stand up, then they do it sitting down. If they don't have the ability to do that, then they would do it laying down, and so on and so forth. So Allah will not burden us with a religious regulation, with commandments that are beyond our means. We are limited in our capacity to perform certain things, and Allah will not give us things beyond our capacity. The second ayah that, again, some people mistranslate or misinterpret has to do, it says, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا ما آتاها, and it has to do with the issue of financial responsibility in a domestic relationship, in a marriage. So Allah is not going to overburden someone beyond what they have, meaning the wealth that they currently possess. You're not required to take on loans to be able to conduct yourself in your own responsibilities. That's not a religious requirement per se. And then finally, when you go back to the tafsir of the first ayah I mentioned, which is the closing of Surah Al-Baqarah, it speaks about us not being held accountable for things that are beyond our abilities, such as the ideas and the thoughts that cross our minds. As long as we don't dwell on them, then Allah will not take us to task for them. And that was actually a response to an ayah that came before that, which is whatever comes to your minds, Allah will judge you for it. So then this was kind of like a breaking of that shackle and that heavy burden that the Sahaba felt. And they said, there are things that come on our minds, are we going to be held accountable for them? And then this ayah came as a prescription and as a remedy for that heavy burden that they felt, that Allah will not take you to account for the thoughts that simply cross your mind. You're going to be taken to account for your actions, for the choices that you make, for what you say and for what you do, and also for dwelling on certain thoughts that you're not supposed to have. So I wanted to highlight that aspect. So we are in constant need of Allah's help at any minute and any moment of our lives. This dua is teaching us to turn to Allah to help us overcome and to help us, to protect us actually, before even overcoming, to protect us from ever being afflicted with a test, a trial, a tribulation that is unbearable. So that's the very first portion. The second portion, ash-shaqa, we said it has to do with misery. So I'm saying, oh Allah, protect me from being miserable. And I wanted to say the statement now in English, not necessarily focusing on the Arabic, but through the meanings that we explained last time. So, oh Allah, I ask you to ever be, to protect me from facing misery, from facing crisis, and from facing hardship. All of that is included in this word ash-shaqa, darak ash-shaqa, which is to get to that situation of a crisis, a hardship, or to be in a miserable condition. And then finally, again, shamatat al-a'da is the mockery, the malicious joy of your enemies, to see you down and to see you in a negative situation. So that's called gloating in English, and I didn't have the precise word last time, so I wanted us to be aware of that. So we're asking Allah to protect us from the gloating, from the malicious joy of our enemies. So to give a little bit more commentary also, the Messenger ﷺ, we said, used to use this dua often. So this is an oft repeated prayer that is good for us to incorporate into our routine of whenever we say dua. You know, the best type of dua is the dua that we find in the Quran and the dua that the Messenger ﷺ was consistent in saying. Sometimes people try to be creative with their dua. You can't go wrong with using a prescription that Allah and His Messenger have approved of. And that's why we try to focus on these prophetic statements and these prophetic meanings. Now, maybe we're not able to be as eloquent in the Arabic language, but at least extract the deep meaning and then say it in a language that you are comfortable with. There's nothing wrong with that. But the point is, make sure that the meanings of the words you're saying are appropriate, and that you're not praying in a way that is actually going to cause the displeasure of Allah, because when we turn to Allah, we want Him to be pleased with us. So he also, not only did he practice it regularly, he encouraged and he instructed his community to also do so, and this showcases and highlights for us how important this particular prayer is. So it's a beautiful prayer that includes a lot of seeking protection. We said this is also a means of preventive measures. It's a preventive measure before we're even faced with adversity, before we're faced with a crisis, before we're faced with a pandemic. This is something for us to constantly be prepared for. Because, you know, sometimes you may not have felt it yet. It's all around you, but you have not been directly affected by it. So it's a good time to practice this particular prayer, so Allah will remove any harm from even coming your way. The next thing I wanted to highlight is when we said wasu'il qada, you know, sometimes people misunderstand that some type of decree that comes to us from Allah is negative. The proper understanding of decree is that nothing that Allah decrees truly is negative. Rather, it's the way we perceive the decree of Allah. But everything related to Allah is perfect. It has no flaw. There is no accidents. There is no mistakes. There is no accidents. You know, a lot of times we have to watch our language because we say, you know, that person died and it was like not meant for. No, actually it was meant for, because God had ordained that. But we may not know the deep divine wisdom behind why certain things transpire in our reality. But as far as Allah is concerned, the way we look at Allah is perfect in every single aspect. He's perfect in His names and His attributes. He's perfect in His regulations and commandments. He's perfect in His decree and what He decides to take place in the universe. He's perfect in all ways. And that's why we say Allah is far above any imperfection. When we say subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the most sublime, He's the most transcendent, He's above any errors and any mistakes and any accidents, any flaws and any deficiencies. So Also, when we say, "Oh Allah, I seek your protection from a negative outcome," that's what su'al qada is. It is not to be taken as a contradiction of something which we are required to have as believers, which is called ar-rida bil qada, which is to be pleased and content with Allah's decree. Now, part of Allah's decree is that we make this dua. And you know, some of you may have come across the narration that says what pushes certain things that are to take place or to manifest is dua. So dua pushes away some qada. And the scholars, when they comment on this, they say is because your dua was actually part of Allah's decree as well. And that's how it pushes it back. It pushes back that possible outcome that was going to be negative. But how was it pushed back? Through your dua. And what was your dua? Your dua was also part of Allah's decree and part of Allah's will. So Allah has made this regulation of us making dua as part of His qada. So we need to turn to Him and ask His protection from any negative outcomes that may be a possibility. You know, the thing with Allah's knowledge is that Allah knows, as the scholars say, مَا كَانَ وَمَا سَيَكُونُ وَمَا لَمْ يَكُنْ لَوْ كَانَ كَيْفَ يَكُونُ. Allah knows what happened in the past. And Allah knows what will transpire in the future, what will take place in the future. And Allah knows those matters that did not happen, had they happened, how they would have manifest. So Allah's knowledge is all-encompassing, and we can't even truly comprehend it. But the point here is, when we're asking, "Oh Allah, protect us from su'il qada," protect us from any negative outcome, which is a possibility. All things are a possibility. Good things are a possibility. Bad things are a possibility. We're asking Allah to protect us from any negative outcomes and negative possibilities. Again, we have a pandemic right now. The possibilities are so many, but is every single person being affected the same exact way? Not really. So we want to ensure that we ask Allah to manifest in our destiny, in our fate, those things that are the best of outcomes and not negative outcomes. And again, not necessarily according to a materialistic understanding, but according to an understanding that is pleasing to Allah. So that's what I wanted to share as a continuation of this particular dua. And this dua also showcases to us, as a conclusion, how the messenger was gifted with something called jawami'ul kalim. We said precise, concise, comprehensive, profound speech. He would use a short amount of words, but they would have great and deep meanings. As believers, what we are to do when we look at these prophetic statements, in this particular case, it's a statement that seeks protection from all sorts of harm, all sorts of evil, whether they happen to be in our worldly life or about our next life, whether they happen to be about our religious practice or our material lifestyle. So we need to make sure that we keep doing this dua, we keep saying it, we understand it. As I said before, 3 principles in these prophetic prayers. Number 1, to truly understand what we are saying. Number 2, to believe in what we are saying, that Allah is truly in charge. And finally, number 3, to utilize them and to apply them when appropriate. I hope that we all can turn this into practice, because that's what real knowledge is about, to practice the information that we learn. And I ask Allah to protect us all from the things we are asking for protection, to protect us from trials and tribulations that are beyond our means to handle, that are overbearing, overwhelming, to protect us from ever having misery, ever having a crisis, ever having turmoil, to protect us from negative outcomes that are possible, and finally to protect us from the gloating of our enemies, for them to maliciously and make fun of us and mock us for a difficulty that we find ourselves in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.